Now with W2W Link. Thanks for joining us today for our fabulous webinar. With me at W2W Link, I have Holly Murdoch, and Holly's going to be running the show today. And we are so excited to have Dr. Relly Nadler of incredible background on emotional intelligence. But first, we want to just make sure we're all on the same page on logistics. If you have any questions, issues with your audio, you can use your right side of your screen panel from GoToWebinar and hit the question box. The plus sign will open it up, and you can ask questions of us. If you have any operating or procedural questions, or during the whole talk, we're going to ask you to go ahead and put the question down just like it's in your head. Go ahead and put it in, and then we're doing Q&A with Relly a little bit later in this time. But just as you're thinking one, go ahead and put it on in, and we'd love to hear it all through the show and be using it at the back end during the Q&A. And so today, I want to say thanks for joining us. We've got a big group of you guys, and I can see why. I myself have been really one that's tried to learn on emotional intelligence. I think that growing as a leader, I found I had to get wiser and more situational and more self-aware. And probably some of my biggest gaps were when I wasn't aware of my impact on varying personalities. And so the blessing of, Relly, your background is he's written a number of books because he spent a lot of time growing the subject, researching the subject, and trying to bring it to bear both in weekly talk shows that he does with Dr. Kathy Greenberg, who's the fabulous person that introduced us. Kathy, as you guys know, does work-life balance and work-life happiness, the science of happiness research, and she's in and around us. And she introduced me to Relly. The two of them interviewed me on my kind of corporate to entrepreneur journey. And he is running a lab called True North Leadership. So the TrueNorthLeadership.com is the site I go to go look at ideas. I've read one of his books. I need to read more, and have listened to audio tapes after their Monday show. You can listen to it live. And so I'd like to really open us up by introducing you, Relly, and saying thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. This is great to be here. Like I said, we had you on our show, and you were delightful, and it's great that you have me on your show, so thank you very much.
Oh, definitely. We've got a community that, is thriving because we're all trying to ascend in our careers. As you know, we've got folks that are choosing to do it in a corporate setting, entrepreneur setting, in career transitions, or many of us are dealing with it in more than one setting in this world today. And so that's all the more why we need to have the knowledge you're going to bring to us. So please share with us your ideas, and know everybody that we'll do a 5-minute tour of W2W Link at the back quarter of the time, and then open up the Q&A that you sent us in on or during that time. So Relly, let's go from there.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. I think I'm going to start just giving a little bit of, my background, and then we'll get into hearing from the audience, from our listeners, what are some of the key challenges they have. But this idea of emotional intelligence, most of us have heard this for quite a while. Matter of fact, Kathy and I are going to interview Dan Goleman actually next week, which is very exciting, because when I saw his work, his book came out in 1995, Working with Emotional Intelligence. It reminded me of the master's program I was in the 70s, which was called Confluence Education. And confluence, as we know, is where two things come together. Well, there, the confluence was thinking and feeling. So it was really an early emotional intelligence program, because we're all educated about how we think. We're just not so educated about how we feel. So when Goleman's book came out in 1995, it quickly resonated with me, because I said, oh, this sounds just like the master's program I had, which was really more about educating the emotional domain. And really from that point on, I have been doing leadership development work. I'm a licensed psychologist. It just gave me a different frame to work with. So maybe a bigger umbrella to put a lot of the work that I was doing around emotional intelligence. And I'll define that as we go along and talk about some of the research. So the two things that I love about emotional intelligence, one, once you talk to people about it, everybody quickly gets it. Oh, yeah, that's right. My boss has it, or doesn't have it, or my coworker doesn't have it. And then the second piece is not only interesting in that people get it, In psychology, you call that face validity, when all of a sudden you get it and you say, oh, that makes sense. That's called face validity. The second one is it's got a whole background of 35 years of research of what's the difference of someone who's in the top 10% and someone who is average, or in organizations, what's the difference between exceeds expectations and meets expectations. Some organizations, highly effective. Any organization, whether it's be big or small, that's what we all want to know. And then for ourselves and for the people that we lead, how do we get more people into that top 10%? And so that's that metric, Lisbeth, that we'll use. The top 10% would be somebody who is highly effective, and that's where a lot of this research is based.
Oh, excellent.
So that's a quick overview. I'll get more into it. But I thought what would be a good way, as we advance the slides here, is thinking about what are some of the key challenges that you have. Now, I'm in California here, and you see Half Dome, which is a challenge, where, people climbing up that face. But what I want to do is just to get a better sense of pairing my comments to the challenges that people have, so that we have our first poll just to get an idea of what's most important to folks as far as their challenges. So you see here, and this may not include everyone, but I think these top 5 at least we'll see. Hopefully we'll get 85% of your key challenges. Managing your stress level, developing individual team members, implementing change in your organization, managing your relationship with your boss and coworkers, or work-life balance. And then maybe, Holly, you can kind of let us know, what do we need to do here?
Right. So all you need to do is just input your, whichever one you feel is your key leadership challenge. We'll give you guys about 30 more seconds, and then we'll close the poll, and then you'll see the results on your screen. Great. We've got about 15 more seconds. Kind of a lot of words, so I'm making sure people can read. All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And then I'm going to share it with you guys. And you should be able to see the results.
All right, so 29%, I'm just going to read through this, and then I'm actually kind of writing this down so we can lead back to this later. 29% implementing change in your organization, 27% dealing with, and I've had it at both, boss and coworkers, 18% work balance, and then the other two are about equal, stress level and development of individual performers. So this is helpful, really helpful for me, because we'll zero in, at least in some of the comments I'll make around implementing change in your organization and managing relationships. So relationships are key, and as we go ahead and advance this slide, each of these 5 areas really are going to deal with relationships. And so what do we know about relationships? Well, first, it's integral in everything we do. And so think about when you're driving home from work today. You're driving home from work, and hopefully, if you're by yourself, your mind's wandering. And what happens when your mind wanders? Well, like it says on this slide here, when your brain is at rest, the default mechanism is to think about yourself and think about relationships. So I remember when I first heard that, I go, oh, that is interesting. So, without us realizing it, that's the gravitational pull of our brain. And going back to what our poll just said, so maybe it's thinking about all this change in relationships. And when do you have to exercise your leadership? When do you have to really exercise your emotional intelligence? It's change. And in the organizations that I'm in, that is the key arena. It's like the Super Bowl for leadership, is dealing with change, coming up with the change, getting buy-in from the change, communicating the change, holding people accountable to the change. It just takes in all the dynamics of human relationships, the change does, as does managing relationships with your coworkers and your boss and probably your team members too, and especially it's around change. So that's where we go when the brain is at rest. And that goes into this world of emotional intelligence. So here's the slide we'll walk you through a little bit. Let's say you're hiring somebody, and you want to say, all right, well, how smart are they? What's their IQ? You see the picture of Einstein. Expertise, you know, is it financial? Is it in sales? What kind of expertise? Let me look on their resume. And then EI, or emotional intelligence. Excuse me. So when you look at those three, well, the first two, your IQ and expertise, are the ones that help you get your job. But as someone moves up and they move from maybe an individual performer to any time you have more than one or two people that you're leading, you are now in this world of emotional intelligence. And EI accounts for up to about 90% of your success factors. And I think that's why this is a popular topic. We have a lot of people on the line. 90% of your success factors are in this EI world, which I'll show you that map. So other studies may have it a little bit lower, but most of them, it's anywhere between 60 and 90 are the key factors. I'll give you an example. One of the companies I'm working with is an animation company. And it's an entertainment company, and they really are great technical folks in animation. And so what happens in that organization, probably like the ones that you're in, someone is so good at meeting deadlines. They're so creative. They are constantly, you can count on them. They're reliable. And they are so good, what do? We say, oh, you're so good at all these things that you do for yourself. Now we're going to give you 5 or 6 people that you can lead a department. And you can see on some level, from a training standpoint, it's so unfair. Here's a person that has all this technical expertise, has done a great job at managing themselves, and then we say, okay, now you got to manage these others. And a lot of times you're like, really? How am I supposed to do that? I don't have the certifications in that. I don't have the classwork in that. I don't have the trainings in that. Elizabeth, kind of like you were saying in the very beginning, in that we almost expect that the person to magically have these skills, around EI and holding someone else accountable, motivating someone else, giving tough feedback. So let me just pause for a minute, because Elizabeth, I imagine you may have a comment about this, just kind of what you've seen.
Yeah, I guess I was mulling just as you said that is I can picture, and I'm interested in your perspectives as you walk us through this, is I think what I felt and I see around me is as a younger leader, you're the go-to person and you get rewarded for that. And then when you go to manage others and motivate others, there's that really earned skill of being the go-to person. And so I'm interested in some of your thoughts on what's coming up on Spotlight, because I do think that shift to quit being the go-to person and more, really cueing in on what's motivating each person around me is a real shift in how you feel in your skin each day as a leader.
Well, and that's why I wanted to kind of get your comments, because I think it's probably similar for others. That's why I say in some ways it's almost unfair, because you have all this experience, certification, training in your expertise, but you may not have it in leading others. People may have, like, even in today's MBA program, maybe there's 1 or 2 classes around organizational behavior, but it may not be on actually how you motivate, how do you lead, the things that you have to do. One of the things, Elizabeth, that I found is it's hard from an individual performer to a leader is your reinforcement, your rewards. Like you said, you get it from getting stuff done and doing things on your own. Once you have more people reporting to you, you're probably going to do less of the task, more of the directing of the task. So there's a shift that not everybody makes, but it's getting a lot of reward from watching other people succeed. And it may not be as immediate for you. Someone else is getting the accolade that you got. And that's why the leadership doesn't fit for everybody, because for people who gravitate to it, they have a lot of internal reward about helping others and helping others reach their actualization and getting things done. So that's kind of a gap, that not everybody may relate to. So let's go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit more about the EI. And you may want to think about your best boss. So maybe just think about this for a second, then instead of asking questions. But I usually, when I do training Elizabeth, we start with this. So think about your best boss, what they say and what they do, and what was the impact on you. A lot of times people will go back and they'll think about their boss and they'll say, for example, so-and-so, they really stretched me. They trusted me. They believed in me. And then what was the impact? Well, the impact was I would do anything for this person. I would try harder for this person. I would work smarter for this person. Sometimes they would say my best boss gives me really tough feedback, or they're really a good listener, or they believe in me more than I believe in myself. These are all characteristics, of your best boss, and typically the impact of that is, and you think about it, everybody on the line, you have a team that, is looking to you. And there's this aspect of your best boss that can enhance what's called discretionary effort. And it's what I just described. Discretionary means I could do it, then again, I could not do it. I could work a little harder, I could go home right now. It's discretionary. And for the best boss, people want to work harder, and people want to do more. And so that's a good metric in an organization. And I would ask people, you don't have to answer this, but think about for yourself. You're on this webinar now. Are the people who are outside your office, are they thinking and saying you're their best boss? If not, then a lot of these things as we go through today, at the end there's an assessment that we can talk about. It's on my website, that if you were to do a couple things differently, you could move into being that best boss for them. So let's go ahead, we'll advance to the question I'd like to ask to groups along with this, and this is about being under the spotlight, is would you buy into the idea that every leader has underestimated their influence over others? And then maybe, Elizabeth, you could be our audience here. I'll ask you. And so what that means is, from my experience, and I've been doing this for a while now, almost every leader has underestimated their influence over others. And if that's the case, if you kind of believe that, and I'll ask you, Elizabeth, what you think. If that's the case, the leader has underperformed, and so has the team underperformed. So Elizabeth, any sense on that? It's a bold statement. I try to do it just to get people thinking and get their reactions, but that every leader has underestimated their influence.
Yeah, and I think with knowing that we have a ton of women leaders on the in our membership and in with us today, and the ones who are going to listen, I would underline that I think for a lot of us, as we advance, we go from being 50% of the management to being 30%, and then literally 10%. So as a woman leader, we increasingly, what we do in our actions and our voice gets magnified as we accelerate inside of a Fortune 500 or an entrepreneurial company. So I think that what we find then is that we're being told that we're in the spotlight more, and even when we're walking down the hall, or I got feedback that when I was highly animated and excited about something, that just hearing my voice, they weren't sure whether that was positive or negative what they were hearing down the hall, and it was real important to them what it was, because now I was much more magnified as being really important to their kind of security or motivation. So I'm interested in your teaching us more on how to learn from this.
Well, you just brought up a great point, and I didn't think of this. So I like this as a metaphor that you're under the spotlight. But just as what you said, I think is really interesting. So think about a spotlight. Your spotlight on the stage, and maybe when you're a manager, there's a lot of women on the stage. And the further you go up, there's less and less women on the stage who move up to top leadership. Therefore, the spotlight is on them even more so. Maybe you were in a crowd, and now you're in a smaller group. One organization I'm working with has about 300 managers, and about 4 or 5 of them are women. And so they really are under the spotlight. They're doing a great job, but they feel that pressure every day. And so that idea that all of us underestimate our influence because we're just trying to do our job, we don't realize this spotlight's following us around us. So therefore, everything we say is magnified. Everything we do is magnified. Everything we don't say is magnified. Everything we don't do. So I was working with an executive, and she said, I just don't realize that when I walk down the hall, and this is in a publicly held company, you know, what I do or don't do, people are reading into. If I don't say hi to someone, they think I'm angry. They think I know they're late on an item, you know, and I'm just walking down the hall in my own world. It has nothing to do with them. But because they're under the spotlight, people end up reading, or in psychology talk about projecting all this onto you. So that's kind of the assumption. If you are underestimating your influence over others, you're underperforming, and so are your team. So now I have what I call these spotlight errors. So what are the key things that sometimes we don't realize? And I'll walk you through these quick, and then we'll have a chance to just see which of these spotlight errors are most common for you. The first one is we don't realize that we have a spotlight. You know, I'm just in this position. I was friends with someone before. You know, I'm the same person. They don't realize that they're under the spotlight. Therefore, what they say and do is magnified, meaning they have a spotlight. So what you shine your light on is illuminated more. Why? Because you're illuminated more. So kind of that double spotlight. You're under the spotlight. Therefore, what you say and do gets illuminated. So some people don't realize they have a spotlight. So think about this as we go through it. Number two is they don't realize that the spotlight is on 24/7. One manager I work with was very collegial with her folks, and you know, felt like good friends and with them all. And you've talked about how's your relationship with the team. Oh, they're great. You know, they love me. I love them. And then at night, she would go out for drinks with them. And we know what happens when you have a couple drinks. Her tongue would start getting a little looser, and she would start bashing the executives. And you could see her sense of, well, you know, we're off-site after hours. I'm just one of the gang, off-site after hours. What happened, though, the executives found out about her leadership, in quotes there, and they really got very upset. And you could see for her, she was off-site after hours, but she was still under the spotlight. And she got moved to be an individual performer. It was really kind of lucky she didn't get fired, but she didn't realize the spotlight was still on, off-site after hours. So the next one is you have a spotlight. You kind of realize you have a spotlight, but how do you use it? It's that Monday morning, and you could see it's all these things we got to do. I always like to give the example of most towns have a film festival, and when you have a film festival, they have these 4 or 5 big spotlights that are shining in the air, and they're all going different directions, and they're crossing. Well, often for your team, that's how it can feel on Monday morning. All these 4 or 5 things are important. You got to do all these things, and people can quickly get overwhelmed. And you have to say, well, you got to do everything. You know, we got to get this undone. We got to take care of that client. And if there's not that sense of discipline, people get overwhelmed. So that's the third one. The fourth one is you do have a spotlight, but what do you focus on? You focus on everything that's wrong. And I like to say that the manager default is the find fault. You don't have much time. You're in a rush. You got a lot of things on your plate. What do? Let me tell you what's wrong with this. Well, could you fix this? Could you fix that? So we go right to what's wrong. The manager default is the find fault. And so we focus on just what's wrong. And then the last one is we focus on strengths, but do we focus on them enough? So one of the examples that let's just go to this. So I think everybody's got a good sense of this. Which one is most common for you? Holly, anything else you want to say about this?
No, just open up the polls, and I'll give you guys about 15 seconds to get through it, and then we'll shut it down. Right. Give you a few more seconds here. Great. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll.
Okay.
And I'll share it now.
So the biggest one, oh, this is interesting. I'm glad we're doing this. This is some great research. So 40% are saying not strengths enough. 25% goes back to the stress we talked about earlier, trying to focus on everything. And then again, we have a tie for not realizing that they have a spotlight and maybe focusing on the wrong things. And then 9% don't realize that it's on. So this is, I think, pretty good news for our group, Liz, that we hear, because it's not number 4, which has a smaller percentage, focusing on what's wrong, but it's not focused on strengths enough. So I'll give you a quick example of what we all end up doing. And I could say, to you, Elizabeth, let's say we're working together. I could say, so Elizabeth, thanks for giving me that report. I really appreciate it. So how long did that take? Maybe 3 seconds. And did you get any reaction out of that, Elizabeth? Elizabeth, you still there?
Yes.
You may be on mute. Did that do anything for you? My 4-second acknowledgement, did that do anything for you? Thanks a lot for bringing them forward. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it didn't.
Okay, good. I wouldn't think it would. But I think the key in this is it took 4 seconds. Now, what if instead I said, focusing on strengths, thanks a lot, Elizabeth, for bringing that report. Let me tell you a couple things that I particularly like. You came in early and checked in with me to see if we were on track and get clarity. Sometimes people don't want to bother me, but I'm really glad you did that. That's number 1. Number 2, I really saw you putting a lot of hours into this. There's a lot of effort. That's one of the values we have in this organization. Number 3, I saw you collaborating with Mary. Collaboration is how we're going to grow, sharing strengths. That was very cool to see. And, number 4, the final report really was great. It was well done. There was no errors, and it was well presented. That's exactly what we want to see you keep doing. So now, how long did that take? Let's say 30 seconds. 4 seconds, 30 seconds. And now, given I had to make this up, but any kind of, if you were to hear that, Elizabeth, any reaction?
Yeah, I mean, it's much more positive, and, I'll be interested in, take us to some of the next few slides.
Yeah, good. Well, I think what's good about this, and this is where I want to just emphasize with people I work with, it's really, this emotional intelligence happens in relationships and it happens in moments. So that was an example of an extra 30 seconds is someone who exceeds expectations versus someone who meets expectations. It was those 26 seconds. But what did I do? I was specific. I came up with 4 impacts or things that I liked. And now these days, Blaise, what I try to tell people, what you want to do is think of power and the acronym POWRR. POWR, point out what, POW, what's right and repeated. What do you want to see? What was right and what was repeated? So when I'm focusing on strengths, that's what I want because I'd like them to repeat it, and it worked well. We know from the brain neuroscience when someone gets an acknowledgement like that that's specific about them, I had to really think about it versus saying, oh, you did great. That releases a little bit of dopamine in the brain. And when the people release dopamine, they end up just feeling more pleasurable. All right, so we'll go through these next ones. And people, if you have questions, one of the questions I see is any tricks to catch when you're spotlighting in the wrong pattern. I think just being aware of this and maybe just kind of write down the manager default is to find fault, and we all do that. But the more aware you are of this, the better it is. And as we go through this first block, I think the self-awareness, just talking about it, can really help. So what is emotional intelligence? Well, the first one is, on the self side, understanding yourself. So that goes right to that question. Then once you understand yourself, you have to manage yourself. And then on the social side is understanding others, managing others. So that's that piece that I said, if you look at that, when I first saw that, I go, huh, makes sense. That's face validity. I got to know myself. I got to manage myself. I got to know others. I got to manage others. And then if you look at this in the EA model, here's what's called these competencies inside each of the boxes. And Goldman and his group, there's about 3 different groups who are really focusing on emotional intelligence, but I really like the Goldman model, and this is from some of his work and Richard Boyatzis and Case Western University. These are the key competencies as you look at that. And take a quick look at that. And if we were doing training, I would kind of turn this into a game show, which I'm not now. But 2 of them men are better at, and 2 of them women are better at. When you look at the whole, there is not a gender difference. Women aren't necessarily better in emotional intelligence because it has the term emotions in it. But if you look at the bullets, typically on the self side, men are a little bit more confident and a little bit more adaptable. Now, when I'm in mixed groups, people always say, "Oh, I don't think so. My husband, he's not adaptable," and this is just from the research that's showing. And again, slight trends. And then on the social side, women have a tendency to have more empathy and also building bonds. So an interesting dichotomy. But the main thing is there isn't a big gender difference as you look at all of them, and it can be learned. Your IQ cannot be improved, but your emotional intelligence can be improved with training, coaching, the things that we're talking about. So let's move to the next slide. Now you have all these emotional intelligence competencies. You're focusing on strengths. These are derailers, and we've all seen these. So these can trump all the good work you're doing as a leader. Lack of impulse control is probably the key one. Inability to work well on a team, difficulty handling change, poor interpersonal relationships, and just this language, smartest person in the room. One of the things I talked about earlier about IQ, why is that not the key factor? Everybody, when you get to a certain position, is probably high average in IQ. They're 115 and above. We're all in those meetings, though, where someone's waving those 2 IQ points and saying, "Hey, look, I've been here before. I've done this. I'm the smartest person." It really becomes an equalizer, IQ. And when someone does that, that can really get in their way. So a derailer gets you off the track for success. One of the key ones we see is lack of impulse control. And Daniel Goleman has brought this idea of when someone lacks impulse control, it's in the amygdala part of the brain, the fight or flight response. And if you're in that fight or flight response, you can have what's called the amygdala hijack. So let's go ahead and advance this slide. And what happens in this hijack, you see the person there, the amygdala gets blood and oxygen, so the hour goes up, and it's in the very back of the brain. And what gets less blood and oxygen is your prefrontal cortex. I'm sure if we were to ask you on the line there, can you come up with examples? Well, with this, when the blood and oxygen are in the amygdala, it's that fight, flight, or what's called a freeze, the amygdala hijack. It overtakes the prefrontal cortex, which is right behind the temple. That's where your IQ relies. That's where judgment, rationale lies. So when your amygdala, when you are hijacked or someone your team is hijacked, you're operating with less than 10 or 15 of your IQ points. And you think of the demand that we all have today, can any leader, any owner of a business afford to be operating with less IQ points? The only good news here is by being aware of this, there are some things that you can do to quickly bring back your IQ, so it's temporary. So let me pause for a second here, Elizabeth, and see if you have a question before I give a couple examples.
No, I think that with 25 minutes in to go, I think we probably need to just keep
Okay,
moving
so let's just keep going.
Yeah, thanks.
So if you look at this, one of the things that the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex also controls is emotional regulation. And this example, this is the soccer player Zinedine Zidane. And anybody who plays soccer, you probably know about him, and you saw it on YouTube. And if this was a live video, it's the video of the headbutt. at the very end of his career, last game of his career, he got so upset at the Italian player in the blue shirt behind him, he headbutted him. And that's the way his career, in those matter of probably 5 seconds, his career is going to be remembered as the headbutt guy. You saw, if anybody watched the tennis match last night with Serena Williams, you know, they alluded to 2 years ago when she was in the U.S. finals, and she had a hijack, and she was screaming at the lines judge. You know, these things, these hijacks, they're hard to shake, and it only has to happen a couple times. So what can you do? So let's go ahead and advance it. So think about the lights are out on the prefrontal cortex, and if you want to be able to get back your IQ points, the first piece, go ahead and Holly, just advance it. The first piece is to take a deep breath, and I just learned this on one of my calls today, and people can try this. This is what's good about those calls. Breathe in like you're sipping something through your mouth. Kind of breathe in through your mouth, and then exhale through your nose. Just a slight breathe in through your mouth, and then exhale through your nose. So it's one of these things when you count to 10, you can do that breath. It's called a cooling breath. But then the hypothesis here is if you ask yourself these questions, it's going to turn the light back on your prefrontal cortex. We all know count to 10. We all know take this cooling breath, breathe in through your mouth, breathe out through your nose. But then, what am I thinking? I can't believe these guys this meeting's going on and on and on. What am I feeling? You know, I'm just frustrated. Geez, I got so much work to do. What do I want to happen? I want to get this meeting over with. I want to be constructive. How are you getting in your own way? So 1, 2, and 3 gives you a lot of data, self-knowledge about yourself. Number 3, what do you want to see happen? Number 4 is going to help you to say, okay, what do I need to do differently? Well, how am I getting my way? Well, I'm just sitting here fuming, you know, tapping my foot. I'm not doing anything. All right, with all that data, what could I do differently now? So that allows the IQ points to come back because these questions are not in the amygdala. These questions access the prefrontal cortex. So we'll keep going. So that's something you can do now when you say to your family or your kids, do that breath in, count to 10, and ask yourself these questions. So some of this is pretty obvious. We know we're wired to connect, and whether it's in your family or your business, you are the emotional thermostat. How you feel, everybody else feels on one way or another. And so it can work out to be really well, or it could work out to be toxic. And so let's go ahead and advance the slide. And so how we know about relationships, and you may have heard some of this about the mirror neuron, most moms have a really advanced or mature mirror neuron. It's the part of you that can feel what's going on in someone else. It's the empathy part we talked about earlier. You can feel what's going on in someone else, but you also have to quickly assess, you know, where they're going. What's the goal here? And the mirror neuron is a new discovery, and there's been a lot of research that that's the part of the brain that really houses empathy. And there's a lot of these mirror neurons. Like I said, moms are really well developed. I had a partner for a while that was an MBA from Harvard. I think his was underdeveloped. We would be in a group. We would be doing training. And at the break, I'd say, well, how's it going? Do you think we're doing all right? And he'd always say, you know, I can't tell. And he was what was called mind blind. His mirror neurons weren't developed. He couldn't read the heads nodding. He couldn't read people were smiling. He couldn't read that there was a lot of energy in the room. He was mind blind. So just some interesting research, you know, about that. So keep going. I'm trying to go a little faster here. So this is just some research. You can read this, those competencies we had in the chart. The more competencies you have in emotional intelligence, really at all different levels, the more successful you're going to be, whether it's sales, whether it's even in something like computer programming. They found people in computer programming were building bonds, they were networking, they were achievement-oriented, they were sharing secrets with other folks. So even in fields you wouldn't think were high in emotional intelligence. So I'm going to go through a few of these competencies and ask you where you are and where do you think one of your direct reports are. And so a direct report is someone that you are their leader. And the first one, and let me show you how this works. So go ahead and advance this. The first one we're going to talk about is initiative. Now, I mentioned earlier, not only is this stuff interesting, it's based on this database. So initiative is important. Well, what's someone who's average? What do? They regularly, consistently, and so you want to think about 80% of the time, they address current opportunities. Not every once in a while, regularly, consistently. They regularly, consistently are ready to act. They regularly, consistently make extra efforts. So I'm going to ask you in a minute, where are you? Average or star. Now what the star does is those 3 bullets for the average, but in addition, they're initiating actions for the future. Not every once in a while, regularly, consistently. You're in a meeting and they were saying, okay, what do we got to do for the future? What do we got to do about this? Your hand, or your person you're going to rate, your direct report's hand, it's going up 80% of the time. So, 4 out of 5 times, you can count on them coming up with an idea for the future. That's someone who exceeds expectations of initiative. So what we have is just a quick poll just to see, and this is really more for yourself, where are you? Average or star? And the way we have this, I'll let you read it.
Right. I set it up so it's a multiple answer, so you can check for yourself if you feel like you're a star, and then for a direct report if you feel like they're a star. And I'll give you guys about 20. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So they can do 2 of these, is that right?
Yes, you can check multiple answers.
Okay. So the question is, where are you? Star or not by that behavior? Where is your direct report?
Right. All right.
So go ahead at least do 1 for yourself, 1 for your direct report, or if you don't have one.
All right, I'm going to close the poll. So you should be able to read this as the first 2 being yourself and then last 3 being your direct report.
Okay, so look at the drastic difference, and that's what we're saying. These are basic tools that you could bring right to your direct report, because at least from the group on the line, 61% are you saying, yep, hey, 80% of the time I'm thinking about the future, initiating, but I'd say this is pretty drastic. 26% are you saying, your direct reports are. So that's pretty drastic.
Yeah, I guess I'd say it's 26 to 15, so it's slightly greater, but about 40% don't have a direct report. So just to be clear, it's slightly ahead on my direct report. It's not quite as
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So 39 don't. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
Great. So thanks for that clarification.
Yeah. No, it's neat. So good.
Okay, good. Well, let's keep going, because now I'm going to show you. I just pulled out a couple of these. This one we're not going to vote on, but I just wanted to let you know. This is why I think this is such great information, because it's telling you do more of this. So trustworthiness. Average, acts consistently with values. Star. We all know it when some celebrity makes a mistake. What does media want? When are they going to apologize? How sincere was their apology? So are you apologizing? And are you may not be running around saying I'm sorry, but you're being vulnerable. This didn't work out so well. I think I could have put more time. I'm not really satisfied with this. And this meaning what you did. The more you do that, the more they'll do that. All right, so let's go to the next one. And this one you will get a chance to vote on. So this is developing others. Not everybody has a direct report, but this one's really critical because, I'm just wondering for time's sake, let me go through it. Maybe we won't vote on this one. So you can see, are you giving timely feedback? Because we want to have at least allow some questions. So what's the key differentiator? If you want to be great at developing others, are you giving timely feedback and acting as a mentor? First is expressing positive expectations, providing support. So for you listening to this, do you have one-on-ones with people? And are you not only giving them negative feedback, the manager defaults as to find fault, you're giving them positive feedback. What's the ratio of positive to negative? Ideally, 3 to 1. 3 positive to 1 negative. So Holly, let's maybe just advance through because I think we have
We'll go to
poll.
the two-step with you.
Yeah. So here's a tool that you could use right away, and then we will do a poll at this, and this will kind of bring us to the end where we can start getting a couple more slides and then getting some questions from you. So the leadership two-step, I was working with a leader that I learned a lot from, and she was the CFO of this organization, and it was a water company, and they had delegated acquisition. She had delegated acquisition to some of her people, and it was in Mexico. And in the conversation with her, she said, you know, that Mexico meeting, it's on Friday, I don't know what's going on with that meeting. You know, I just hear grumbling, people upset, and then she had an aha. Her light bulb went on, and it was in the coaching. She said, you know what, I'm going to be a part of that meeting. And it allowed me to think about this, that there's a step in, step out, step in, step out. As a leader, what's the beat? It's got a rhythm. She felt the beat. She stepped in at the right time. She could have said, you know, I delegated. Let me kind of give it another week or two. Let me see how it's going on. And her timing would have been off. Anybody that's, you know, you've danced with your spouse, partner, or significant other, and you don't have the right timing, you're stepping on each other's toes. Well, she stepped in at the right time. So here's, I'm going to walk you through this, and then you'll rate yourself. You're launching a project or a product or something new. Well, the spotlight's on you. Here's when you step in and you go, okay, you need to clarify what we're doing. Hopefully think about this a little ahead of time. What's the vision? What are we trying to accomplish? What's the end in mind? What kind of resources? And, you know, we've done this before, folks. I'm really so pleased to work with you, and I'm really feeling confident. So that's the step in. Then you're going to step out for a while. And step out, you encourage others. You know, Bill, why don't you check with Susie? She's got a really good feel. And you want to use your team. You don't want to be able to do everything. You want to manage resources. You want to fight the urge to step in and take over. And that's what's called taking the monkeys. Famous time management article, the problem is the monkey. And if you take all the monkeys and the person comes in and sees you and you take their monkey, they're feeling relieved. And you have no place to put their monkey because you've taken everybody's monkey. So don't take the monkey. Let them walk out with more clarification. Next one is, now you're out for a while. Now you're going to be back in. So next slide. And when are you back in? When it's going well is one time. Support, acknowledge, 3-to-1 ratio. Wow, this is great. How do we make this into a process? So-and-so's got to do this next time. Have people report what worked in front of others. Great way to recognize. You also step in when it's not going well, and that's what the CFO did in my example. She righted the ship. So you quickly get in and say, okay, now what's going on? Now you're more directive and right the ship. And then when you do that, you can step out again. Same words as the other one. The only difference is sometimes people may trust their team a little less on this and maybe a little harder. So we're going to ask you just to, on this next slide, just to do a quick little voting. Why don't we advance that? So here it is. Which one for you needs the most improvement? It's the initial launching, stepping in. Some people say, oh, I got to step out. Or step in when it's going well, step in when it's not going well, or step out the last time.
Right. I'll give you guys a 30 seconds here. Great. About 15 more seconds. All right. I'll go ahead and close the poll.
Okay.
Here are the results.
Okay, so step out. So I think where is which needs the most improvement? Okay, stepping out, that makes sense. A lot of maybe business owners, and both stepping in when it's going well, stepping in when it's not going well, because it can feel like conflict. So pretty good mix. We have a quick question here. Do we want to save that to the end?
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. All right, so let's keep going. We've got a couple more slides, and we'll open it up. So here's something that hopefully will quickly resonate with you. And again, I'm trying to just give you hands-on tools that you can use with your team right after this meeting. White space. It really comes from the word intelligence. And intelligence means enter through the lines. So you say, you know, I'm going to this really, really interesting webinar on emotional intelligence. I'm really excited. You know, I'm sorry I won't be at that meeting. Okay, so that's what you say. But then you get back, you get caught up, and now it's next week, and you never said a word about this webinar. People who are smart will fill in the white space. And you just got busy, but these are negative signs. Do they fill it in with what's positive, accurate, or constructive? No. They say, oh, couldn't have been that important. Why? She or he would have said something. They fill in the white space. They're smart. Versus you coming back today and say, you know, wow, here's a couple things I learned, and you fill in the white space. They're going to fill it in, or you could fill it in. If they fill it in, most likely it's not positive, not accurate, constructive. So you have a great opportunity. That last little quote there is so interesting. If you don't tell people what is going on, they assume nothing's going on. That always astonishes me. You know, a lot's going on behind closed doors, but if you don't tell them what's going on, they think nothing's going on. So the last piece, and then we'll open it up, is you all have teams, and this is research from Barbara Fredrickson. I mentioned a 3-to-1 positive-negative just with your employees. Well, she found high-performing teams were 6-to-1 positive to negative. They were really allowing each other to be influenced by each other. They weren't only advocating. I think one of the differences with men and women, men may have a chance to advocate or advocate a little bit more. Women may question more. Where here it was equal. Not only advocating your position, but also asking questions. And then internal, external focus. A lot of organizations focus on what are we doing, but not having the end user. So that's the ratio for a high-performing team. And one way to get more questions and more positivity is, and Daniel Goleman, I saw this in his work, is the angel advocate. I'm sure he got it from someone else. The first response should be in support of a new idea, not why that idea is not going to work. All right, why don't we stop? You know, at least we got a little bit of time for a few questions here.
Okay, so we are going to tally the questions up by Holly, and really let me go to my screen because I'm going to show a couple things on the site while Holly's tallying it up. So everybody please go ahead and write in a couple more questions. Some have come in. Let me take a couple minutes here on W2W Link, and that is, I get asked a lot, you know, how do I use the tools, or I've seen I'm in a network circle, what does that look like? So I want to let you guys know that, one, we've got a great search box here, so if there's a subject like today, you can put that in, and as articles are related to it, those will come up. And then if you're in a network circle, know that you can hit the tab here or come over here, and you can come to the site. You'll get an email once a day, or if you ask to get it every time somebody posts in a circle, know that you'll get in your BlackBerry, your iPhone, or in your PC inbox comments of what came in that day. And Dr. Kathy Greenberg, we talked about, so I thought I'd go to the Ask Executive Coach. We've got a number of coaches, one on innovation, one on communication, and Kathy on work-life happiness. So as you go into that circle, you're able to go to the bottom of the circle, and you can put in a question or comment back, and a couple times a week, Kathy answers those questions. So feel free to do so. You can also link. You've got some attachment, or you've got an article. You note that you can do that in that area. So I want to let you know how to leverage your network circle. And then, in addition, we've got professional tracks. So know that we've got, like Relly's great webinar today, we've got tracks that you can join, and there's different subjects. And if you go into one, again, for the reality of Kathy being around this, I'm going to go to the work-life happiness track. And in any of these tracks, there's all different kinds of subjects. There's a menu down the left, so you can go in and out at your own pace. You can kick off a new track by coming in, and when it says, let's get started, you can take a self-assessment test at the beginning of a leadership competency track and kind of see where you're at, and then learn through coming through the track. And again, in any of these tracks, there's a Visit Network Circle where you can ask questions of the coach. So with that, I wanted to give you guys a quick peek in and around W2W Link, and we've got Holly that's going to kick in now to asking some of the questions.
Great. Well, we have a few questions here. We have one from somebody on the line, Rhonda. She asks, how do I influence my boss as the direct report to use his EI to make change? Relly, do you have an answer for her?
Do I have what? An answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, perspective.
Yeah. First I think would be sharing some of the insights. I mean, one of the things would be on my website, what you see now up there at the bottom, truenorthleadership.com, there is an EI assessment for free, and there's also a derailleur detector. But I would start with yourself. Hey, I found this really, really interesting. Here's how I kind of rated myself. And you could ask them, how would you rate me? I think you want to plant seeds for them getting interested in themselves. The other thing that I'm very excited about you see on here is this iPhone app. So this has got 10 keys about basic stuff that your boss would be doing every day. Coaching, delegation, giving feedback, some of the things we talked about, the leadership two-step is in there, and each has like a 4 or 5 minute video. So you could say, this is basically leadership on the run. You always have a best practice at your fingers. It's for free, so you could download that if you have an iPhone. It's not cross-platform yet, but it will be. And that way it's just, and I would come at it from some best practices from what you're learning versus let me try to change you, but get him interested in what you're learning. And I'm sure there's more answers to that, but that's kind of a first shot.
Great. And then another question we have from one of our members is, I find the step in and step out the key to assess with women team members. As sometimes the team member confidence is not as high as their skills, and I need to step out more than the woman that is asking for. Really, are there ideas on how to step out when this happens?
Yes. So I think they're saying step out more than they want them to step out. And my sense would be, going back to two things. One is that leadership two-step, where you're being really clear about what the deliverable is, really clear about the relationship. And on the iPhone app, it'll explain it a little bit more too, so that they're clear about what they do. And then the other tool that's on there I didn't go through today is delegation. So one of the things in delegation is being, again, really clear what's the target, but when should they check back with you? And here's what happens often. People check back with you when you don't want them to check back. Oh, I'm doing this now I'm doing that. Then I did this, and you're scratching your head going, I don't know why they're telling me all this. They should be just doing it. Well, you probably didn't have that conversation. These kind of things you have the green light for. Just go do. Or what happens is they come to you and say, oh, the customer wanted this and this, or a coworker wanted this, and I said we would do this. And you said, what? What did you do that for? That's not what I wanted. Well, you probably didn't have the other side of the conversation of what's the red light. So that's part of this delegation tool. What's the red light? They got to come to you first, get your approval. What's the green light? They're empowered to do. So all these kind of work together that way.
Great. Excellent. Any other questions? We've got one I'm going to close with, but I want to make sure if anybody has any others, go ahead and pop them in now.
And so the reason I'll say a word while waiting, you get exposed to these things today, and it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going to, grab it. But the more you practice it, that's where the iPhone app is good, because you say, okay, I got to give feedback now. I got to delegate. What should I do again? Or in the Leading with Emotional Intelligence, my book, it's got 108 strategies. A couple of that we covered today. So very, very hands-on, and either my website or Amazon would have that.
That sounds great. And on that point, we had a member, Ashley Thanks, as the Director of Human Resources, should love tips and resources on teaching her directors about emotional intelligence and spouting and leading their individual teams. So I wanted to mention to this member that wrote to us and others that are thinking that, we have an article also coming from Relly that will be in your follow-up note over the next few days with the link to this. So if you want to use that email to forward to others around you in your role with the article and with the link to the webinar, feel free. And then as we get individual emails here, or at any time Holly's at project manager at w2wlink.com, we can make an introduction across to Relly. And I think you can also do that from coming through. And we had one more question come in, so I appreciate that since we were asking for it. And that is, how do you deal with jealousy if you got promoted over your colleagues? Which I would come in behind this member just to say that I think there's a lot of us as women leaders kind of dealing through with how that makes us feel, because we are very collaborative. We care a lot about our social connectedness, as you told us, Relly. So how do we deal with it,
yeah,
and how do you recover with the secondary question once you get derailed, too? So there are two different questions. So maybe you could help us talk through the different
Yeah. So as far as going from a peer to boss is what that's called, that's got to be challenging, especially like I said, women are good at building bonds, and now all of a sudden you're the boss of somebody. There is an 8 or 9 thing. I think I have it on one page. I got it from someone else, but I'd be glad to pass that on. Kind of the 10 steps. A big part of it is you have to have the conversation. Is one of the 10. I know this is uncomfortable for you. It's a little bit uncomfortable for me. You share your vulnerability. We're in a new role now. Let me tell you about what I expect. Let me kind of get from you. Our friendship is valuable. But it's stating the obvious. Instead of many times we try to, overlook that. And then, I have that. And then the other one that may be of interest to your audience is an article, Teamwork is an Unnatural Act. And it really takes some work. And so there's about 8 or 10 steps of how to bring around teamwork.
Great. And on the teamwork side and bringing people around, thoughtfulness there, did you have a follow-on comment, really, around how to recover when you're derailed? I think that can be a little bit of managing up sometimes as well as the cost of peers as much as also to our team.
Yeah, it's hard to give that short one because it depends on how they were derailed, if it was by others. So a big part is starting with the model of self-awareness, self-management, first for yourself. What's your 50% of the equation? What can I do differently? That's why sometimes working with a coach or talking with a friend, going to your boss if they're the one that hadn't derailed you. And then really coming up with a strategy. It's hard to be specific here just because we could get derailed in a lot of different ways. But the first part is being aware of that. And then it allows you to get off the hijack. I guess the last comment I would say about that, and I think I've seen women do this, men do it also. It's easy to be on your case instead of on your side. And so after every evaluation that comes up, check yourself. Are you on your case now or on your side? Most of us get on our case. More, better, faster. More, better, faster. We all do that. The goal would be to turn that into a learning so you're really on your side. And so that may relate to if you're derailed. How do you get the learning out of it and be on your side versus your case?
No, thoughtful, very thoughtful. And I know what you're saying with the derailing different things, that there's a lot of perspective, depends on the situation. So I appreciate that throughout this hour, Relly, you've really given us perspective. You gave us some very specific actions in different places, but you've also shown us that this is a deep subject, and it's one that we need to grow with you. And I think that's where your wonderful tools, you're constantly working with a new iPhone app. Every week, you and Kathy are on Voice America. So all of that, I say thank you, and we'll look forward to making some strategic introductions for our members that may want to take it to their teams, and we'll bring that across. So everyone, thanks for joining us today. Continue to let us know. We've got the member services at W2W Link Box as well. We're just here for you, and especially with powerful people with big thinking like you, Relly. So a huge thank you, and thank you to everybody who's taken the time out of crazy busy days that we know to be here.
Well, thanks so much, Elizabeth, because you're doing a great thing, and I really appreciate being a part of it.
Excellent. Great. We'll have you on again, and thanks, everybody. Bye now.